Welcome to the Fantasy Source Football Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, sitting here with George Winkler, and we are headed into the final week of buys. You no longer have to worry about one of your star players going on bye and not being available for you, and instead, we have a few more weeks before the fantasy playoffs begin, and overall this time, you're going to be solidifying your lineup and just going with those guys that you go with. However, there's still some players that are going to be moving in and out.
Yes, that's correct. Mike Martz came out with the Chicago Bears this week and said he's going to get Chester Taylor more involved with the offense there because they're playing the Vikings this week, Taylor's old team, and that's a big warning sign for Matt Forte owners.
I mean, in non-PPR leagues especially, Forte has been a disappointment.
He has. I mean, he's had a few big games. The Carolina game comes to mind.
Well, it's Carolina.
But, for the most part, you're going to look at his score. You're going to say that's a big score, or that's a decent score, but going forward it's going to get less and less.
Right. I mean, the expectation going into the season was, Mike Martz, Marshall Faulk immediately, and there may have been some extreme expectation based on Forte's previous ability to catch passes and everything. But it hasn't really worked out just because the team hasn't been all that great for them.
No, it hasn't. And last week was a major bad sign when they couldn't put together a good running game against Buffalo, which has the worst run defense in the NFL. And guess what? The whole Marshall Faulk thing, well, it also works for Chester Taylor because that's what he did in Minnesota. He caught passes out of the backfield for Adrian Peterson.
So there's another team also that is changing its strategy for the backfield. Tell us about that.
This is a big one. We've been waiting for this all season, talking about it, and Rex Ryan finally came out and said he's going to give 50% of the carries from this point forward to Sean Green. He wants to, keep LT fresh for a possible playoff run, and he's over 30, so that makes total sense there. But already we got some people who've been holding on painfully to Sean Green that finally are going to get some relief.
Now, but see, if they're going 50-50, I would think that is not good enough for the Sean Green owners, and it's a horrible disappointment for the LaDainian Tomlinson owners. Because, at a certain point, does that then drop both of them out of, say, the top? Does it drop either of them out of the top 20 running backs?
It could. I mean, yeah, you say if one, an even split is the worst nightmare for fantasy owners. But Green owners are trying to grasp at anything right now. And LT owners are probably going to try to use this as a signal to move him in a trade, so I would just say beware of those LT owners coming around, kicking the tires on your team.
Yeah, exactly. If you are a LaDainian Tomlinson owner and you want to be sneaky about it, you might ask other people, you interested in LaDainian? You interested? And if you don't own him, like you say, be very careful about that. We've got some quarterback changes going on, too. One of the ones I think is getting a lot of attention from the savvier owners that I've been reading is Sean Hill as the Detroit Lions quarterback, and it's kind of turned into a situation of QB Lions, quarterback of a frisky team that might actually be able to do a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they have a matchup with the Bills this week that, provided the weather's okay in Buffalo, should be a pretty high-scoring game, and Hill is a good ball control quarterback. I really look at this as a great thing for Brandon Pettigrew this week. He has a good matchup against Buffalo, which gives up the most points to fantasy tight ends. And here's a guy who comes in and likes to throw safe passes, is coming off an injury, might not want to hang in the pocket too much. So Brandon Pettigrew is a good sleeper this week.
And then the other major quarterback change is in Miami, of all places, where we thought going into the season, okay, they're going with Chad Henne. They're just going to let him fly, let go with the youth movement. They've benched him.
I can't believe it. I mean, this guy has the arm. He had a good finish to last season. They add Brandon Marshall, and he just can't get it done, and mainly in the red zone. I mean, last week he missed Anthony Fasano wide open. Just no confidence there, and it's been leading to big days for Dan Carpenter. But from here on out, you're a Brandon Marshall owner. I believe he has 1 or 2 touchdowns this year, and you better hope for a lot of yards after the catch because Chad Pennington is not going to get the ball down the field to Brandon Marshall.
By the way, just a quick aside, Chad Pennington, one of my favorite names of all time. Chadwick Pennington. And
a guy that Bill Walsh had high hopes for, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Bill Walsh, though, the thing about Chadwick, though, is that he's very, very accurate. He's had one of the highest accuracy completion percentages in the NFL over his entire career. the deep ball isn't necessarily a problem. What I remember reading about him, I believe Football Outsiders did a study on this, is that the problem with his shoulder and the supposed weakness in his shoulder wasn't necessarily in throwing the ball deep. It was in throwing the ball a lot of times. And after 25 throws during a game, then he started showing signs of fatigue and problems on his touch on his deep ball and things like that. I would say that with the Dolphins, which with Tony Sparano wanting to be as run-heavy as he is, that's not necessarily going to be much of a problem. Regardless, I think that Pennington, like Henne, isn't a guy that you want to be starting at quarterback.
No, I don't think so. And this week's matchup against Tennessee is pretty good for passers, actually, but they've been getting after it with a good pass rush there. So, there's no bang when you can't go with the deep ball. And I didn't mean to say Marshall would be any less valuable because he's been pretty low already. And what Pennington could mean, if that's true about you saying he gets tired, maybe there's more wildcat formations for Ronnie Brown toward the end of the game.
Since this is the quarterback apocalypse week with Rivers, Breeze, and Rodgers all out due to buys, let's talk about some of those young quarterbacks that are either first, second year, guys who are running their teams with varying levels of success. What do you think about, let's just go down the list, Sam Bradford, Colt McCoy, Josh Freeman, and let's throw out Jimmy Clausen as guys that you would say, okay, on the face of it, some of them might not be fantasy relevant, but based on their matchups this week and moving forward, how do you see them developing?
Bradford has a good matchup against the 49ers this week. They've been torched by Orton and Matt Moore the last two games. And, he has to make the next step on the road. He's been pretty good at home. He hasn't thrown a pick in his last 3 games, I believe. Hasn't put up big yardage numbers yet. Doesn't have a great receiving core.
He's definitely dinking and dunking.
Yeah, and he kind of has to because he doesn't have that marquee wide receiver. But, he might be a sneaky play if you're desperate this week.
Okay, what about Colt McCoy in Cleveland?
Colt McCoy in Cleveland, I think, has a tough matchup against the Jets. I'd probably stay away from him. I think this is the week where Hillis gets limited by the good Jets run defense, and McCoy's going to have to make a play, and I'm interested to see how he handles that situation.
Probably the most surprising guy to become fantasy relevant this year, Josh Freeman.
Absolutely surprising. I mean, I saw this guy as a total project coming out of college, like a Jamarcus Russell type project, and he's progressed much quicker in his second year. He's leading comebacks. He's playing in the fourth quarter like he's Vince Young, a couple of years back with the Titans, and he's got a great young wide receiver in Mike Williams that he can grow along, and he might actually be one of the better fantasy guys out of this bunch.
I love the comparison to Ben Roethlisberger, especially a young Ben Roethlisberger, where the team still feels like they need to limit what he has to do, but he's got the skills to get away from rushers and everything, and then throw the ball downfield if need be. Last guy I asked about, Jimmy Clausen. He's not, like everybody on the face of it, he's not fantasy relevant right now. You should not start him. It's an awful team around him in Carolina. But do you think that there's still hope for him going into next year?
I'm kind of worried about him, actually, because the situation is so bad. He's been put in the starting lineup. He's been pulled out. He's been sacked a lot. There's a lot going on around him with the coach, the lame duck coach situation. His head has to be like just swimming right now. So, we'll see what happens in the offseason. I think that's a wait-and-see approach with the Panthers.
Yeah, if they get the number 1 pick, can they pass up Andrew Luck?
I don't know. That's a good question.
All right, George, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
All right, thank you.